Many moons ago, I did something very courageous that would shape my life forever. Standing at precisely 3 feet tall, with all my might, I fought off an aggressor to save my mother's life. I was 6 years old. It was Christmas morning, and what was meant to be a joyous occasion quickly turned into a power struggle. On the one hand, to cause harm, on the other, to protect and create some form of peace. What is interesting, though, about this moment is that a 6 year old and an adult male, each in varying ability, stature, and intellect, were both equally capable of wielding an invisible force. I discovered that power was not just available to him, it was also available to me if I chose it. It was an important discovery to make at the time because over the years, I would develop unusual skills in order to regain my own power. I learned how to read silence, to understand how to outwit a manipulator, and what language was effective in order to de escalate a situation. All of this to protect my mum and my little sister. But the purpose of sharing my story is not to romanticize the skills born out of trauma, but to question, why do we only learn about power when there is an abuse of it? My life was shaped by conflict in the home. For my Vietnamese grandmother, it was shaped by conflict outside the home. Like many mothers at the time, she had no control over the geopolitical forces unfolding around her and her family. She escaped Saigon along with her sons by boat and eventually found safety in France. Decisions made far away by people she would never meet had shaped her life forever. My story and my grandmother's, my dear Vanoy, demonstrates how power ripples through generations. It can influence where you live, how safe you feel, what opportunities might be available to you, who gets heard, and who gets ignored. If power is so consequential to our lives, how come we are never formally thought about it? We send people out into the world completely ill equipped and illiterate in navigating power. Once I hit adulthood, I decided to study politics. I wanted to learn how the world worked and why injustice was so prevalent, hoping that someday I might be able to right some wrongs myself. Over time, I was drawn towards places where power and its consequences were very real. I worked with organizations in international trade, children's rights, humanitarian aid, discrimination, technology, and climate change. And in 2025, I tried to get the youngest ever presidential candidate on the ballot. Now I am navigating the world of entrepreneurship. In working across all these spaces, a pattern became clear. There are power games that you must learn to play. Because power isn't just personal, it's relational and it's political. Regardless of the role that you might occupy, regardless of the numbers of years of experience that you might have, power shows up in every single room. In 1998, author Robert Greene released a book called The 48 Laws of Power. It is banned in most US federal prisons today, mainly due to the manipulation techniques that you can learn in his book. Greene distills over 3,000 years worth of history and outlines in explicit detail how to gain power. What becomes apparent throughout the book is that power is a learned skill. When asked why he wrote the book, he said he was struggling in the workplace. He felt powerless and manipulated while working in Hollywood. Green had observed that successful people aren't the hardest workers. They are those that understand power and use it effectively. Refusing to be a pawn to someone else's chessboard, Green sought to gain control over his life by learning about power. The book is often characterized as immoral, but I believe it to be one of the most important books ever written because it shows us that the world is governed by unwritten rules, perception, timing, and strategic positioning. According to research from Gallup, based on a study with 7,000 workers, 1 in 2 people have left a job because of their manager. Think about that. All the qualifications, talent, and intelligence in the world may not prepare you for power tactics in the workplace and possibly put you in an unbearable position. What we sometimes fail to see is that decisions are shaped by who speaks with more persuasion, who has relationships with decision makers, and who sets internal agendas within hierarchies. What this reveals is that we overfocus on competence and undervalue how power plays out in the workplace and in the world. So people are repeatedly surprised when logic doesn't win in the boardroom, when evidence isn't enough in a sexual assault case, and when influence outweighs expertise in global climate talks. Or perhaps some of us are just powerless. Let's look back at history and consider 2 examples of power. Adolf Hitler had everything conventional power looks like. The army, the title, the weapons. People knew the terror that he was about to inflict, yet millions followed him. He planned with ruthless precision to conquer and control for racial dominance. By contrast, Gandhi had almost nothing. No army, no weapons, no title. The British Empire had banned Indians from collecting their own salt, a basic human necessity. Gandhi's response was to walk 240 miles to the sea and collect it anyway. The whole world watched. Millions joined him, eventually bringing the British Empire to its knees. Both applied one of Green's 48 laws of power. They both courted attention at all costs for their cause, with varying degrees of resources available. Gandhi, at the beginning, may have been seen as a powerless figure, dressed in modest clothing. He was underestimated, but he was strategic. What this teaches us is that power is available to everyone, despite resources or restrictions. It's a frightening but liberating thought. And some stand on different sides of history when they use theirs. Jumping to modern day, in the wake of the Netflix series Adolescence and Louis Theroux's Manosphere, we see masculinity's definition of power as dominance and control continue. In an interview with BBC Sound in 2025, relationship coach Lauren Crenn highlights how terrified men are of women's power and clarity. He argues that men mistake dominance and control for masculinity, when in reality, it signals insecurity. He proposes teaching men to relate to women respectfully, but with their deepest sense of confidence and power, because as long as men are terrified of women's power, they will want women in a submissive role. What we can learn here is that a woman's empowerment is deemed a threat because of what masculinity is defined as. Just this week, much closer to home, the CEO of the Dublin Rape Crisis Centre issued this statement. Too many people have failed to notice or have chosen to ignore the completely normalized, everyday, ever-present sexism and misogyny in our schools, our workplaces, and in our wider communities. This points to the importance of how we define power personally and how it has an impact on others around us. This statement acts as a warning that we must heed and reinforces the urgency in which we need to take action. We need to learn and speak about power and identity in every corner of society. We cannot wait for the next generation to learn about power like I did. They need to learn in schools, just like they do maths or science. They need to understand the unwritten rules to life. And I believe we have a duty of care as generations who come before them, because power lives within us, between us, and around us. And it is what we do with that power that defines us. Power is capable of extraordinary things, but there is a responsibility with that. So here's what I want you to do, because every Jedi needs an Obi-Wan Kenobi. I want you to think of one person in your life who might be feeling a little bit powerless right now. I need you to use Law 6 to court their attention at all costs and remind them that the future has yet to be written, and teach them how to move from pain to power, using the invisible forces that likely shaped your life. We don't have to struggle with power, because true power empowers. And if a little girl, age 6, can learn to turn power games into power moves, I have every confidence that you can too overcome anything and stand in your own power. Thank you.